by us, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, and Qatar, was to avoid this pipeline going from this, the biggest natural gas in the world is shared between Qatar and Iran in the southern shores of the Persian Gulf. 1/5 of it falls into the Iranian territorial water, and another 4/5 falls into Qatari territorial waters. The Qataris were given the most advanced technology by us several decades ago to extract that natural gas. Qatar is the top 5 exporters of natural gas, extremely rich and efficient country. And so the 1/5 of it falls in the Iranian territorial waters. Iran and Qatar sort of became sort of strange allies in order to stand up to Saudi Arabia. So the idea was that the Qataris, that's why they were supporting ISIS, was for their natural gas to go through pipelines from Qatar through northern Saudi Arabia up into Jordan, and from Jordan into Lebanon and into northwest Syria, and from there to the very lucrative European market, right? The Syrians said, no, it's not going to go through our territory. That was the reason for that war, because they were siding up, and they have always been an ally of Iran. They said, no, we're going to go with the Iranian idea, which was Iran's pipeline going from this natural gas field, which, by the way, the Qataris call the South Field. The Iranians call it the North Pars Field, P-A-R-S. The Iranians wanted to export their natural gas from that field and attach it to other pipelines that would include the Iranian natural gas, going up north in Iran, west into Iraq, west into Syria, and quite possibly from Lebanon into the European market. They were going to call that the Islamic pipeline or something like that. And that was the reason for that war. The reason, and imagine if the pipeline went through, Iraq is a very rich country. It didn't need to collect money for those pipelines going through its territory. But if that pipeline went through Syria and Lebanon, it would have completely uplifted their economic plight, which they are, both Syria and Lebanon are on the verge of becoming failed states, right? We have different categories. We have developed nations, developing nations, less developed nations, and then utterly failed states. So at the very bottom, I mean, Somalia is a failed state. Afghanistan is a failed state. These countries, Sri Lanka almost became a failed state, until the Chinese came in and bailed them out, pouring billions of dollars. But the reason Iran and Qatar are so interested in Gaza, it's not just for ideological reasons. Whichever country, or if both countries have clout and influence over whichever leadership, Palestinian indigenous leadership, emerges out of this, then they would have a control over the development of those gas fields off of Gaza and have political influence over how that gas is, dispersed into Europe. So that's another geoeconomic and geopolitical element of this conflict, macroeconomic aspect of it.
Iran and Syria, is that what you said?
Sorry?
Did you say this is the interest of Iran and Syria, or is Israel and America?
Iran and Qatar. No, Iran and Qatar want to make sure to have clout over Gaza in order to have a control or a say or an influence over the Gazan natural gas off of East Mediterranean. Of course, a huge part of it is ideological. But you need to understand, Hamas is a Sunni group ideologically aligned to Egyptian and Turkish Muslim Brotherhood, Akhwan Muslimin in Arabic. So ideologically, from an Islamic perspective, they're allied to those. They're not Shias. In Gaza, you need to understand there are 17 paramilitary / if you want to call them that, terrorist groups that are competing with each other. Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, which is 100% financed by Iran, which happen to be Shia, by the way, Islamic Jihad, these are just 2 out of 15. In many cases, they're all competing with each other. There's so many dead bodies turning up in West Bank, and especially in Gaza before this conflict, because of the competition between these groups who wanted to position themselves for power in order to enrich themselves and maybe disperse that money among the Gazan population. No. Everybody talks about Hamas. And by the way, the pronunciation is Hamas, not Hamas. The pronunciation is Hezbollah, not Hezbollah. It really pisses me off with these intentional mispronunciations. Not that I'm an ally or that I'm promoting either of these organizations, Hamas or Hezbollah, by any stretch of the imagination. Go ahead.
It's not Iran, it's Iran, right?
Exactly. Iran is Iran, and right after the war, Ellie, I'm so glad you mentioned this. Right after Iran's response to its embassy being bombed by the Israelis, all the medias I've noticed, CNN, all of them were saying Iran, mispronouncing it intentionally, calling it Iran. It was so disgusting and obvious. Yeah.
Bush, Iran,
It is
came from Bush,
Iran.
Rumsfeld,
Yeah. It's an epithet. That's what they use, and the journalists were using that, which goes to say these are not journalists. These are all PSYOP operatives operating within CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and all the rest of them, News Nation, BBC, PBS, CBS, NBC itself, ABC channel. All of them are tools of the world financiers, and we know who they are. You're going to mention my article in a few minutes. And they're the voices of these entities, presenting in unison the same narrative, and anything that challenges that, again, I don't want to mention certain news channels in English, challenges that, I'll mention Al Jazeera, they will be warned, and they will lose their license in some countries, and they quite possibly may be kicked out of satellite services. That's how much of a threat these news agencies are to the rest of the world, because they're presenting a different narrative. And narrative is what it's all about. Everything is psychological warfare. Everything is a psychological operation. And going after people's minds is the last tool. The mind is the last frontier that technology is trying to invade and quite possibly take hostage and have full control over vis-a-vis AI. I always say about AI, Ellie, that technologists, I am not against technology. I'm against those who use technology at the expense of human truth. There's nothing wrong with technology. You and I are having this conversation with many people watching it later on your YouTube channel, on your social media, on my own YouTube channel, vis-a-vis technology. It's a wonderful tool. But when you turn what's artificial intelligent and call it AI, and what's intelligent as in a human mind and turn it artificial, then you're turning things upside down, and that is extremely corrosive, because that will have direct access to your mind, and then the police, the thought police, will take over, which is the ultimate idea. They'll go after what you think, because computer chips can pick up your thoughts, and they'll go after that. And all countries are guilty of that. Yeah, it's not just us in the United States. All countries are going to use this technology to suppress dissent.
Already on TikTok, it's used to censor propalis. Like our friend here who asked a couple of questions, she's misspelling certain words because the AI will flag and delete. So we have some weird language going on.
Oh, yes.
Right?
And this is what the Nazis were so good at, massaging language. Go ahead.
You say homos, you don't say Hamas. Instead of
homos.
Zion or the
ruining the food. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. It's absolutely crazy. But majority of people are sheep. Now, I always say I'm no longer interested in waking up the sheep. I'm solely interested at this point in my career to wake up fellow lions. The sheep, let them be the sheep, as it says in the Gospels. Broad is the way to destruction, narrow is the way to salvation. I'm not interested in people who are still watching CNN. They are lost cause.
Intellectuals.
Yes, fellow intellectuals, because we have ways and means intellectually, and those who are our benefactors legally going through the 501c3 status in order to get some philanthropists and whatnot to get some good things done.
Okay, so the next topic is I have a guest here. We have a former pilot, Iranian fighter pilot. I would love to bring him up. Mr. Kamran, do you want to come up? Send me a request. Okay, so
Ellie, please have these people write their questions so we won't talk over each other. Have them write their questions in the comment section.
These are people that I
address
know.
them.
They can come to the panel.
Sure.
People I don't
Sure.
know, they won't come up. Okay,
Yeah.
so the next topic was global south, global north. I want to add shadow economy, right? Competing with the south, competing with the north. And then I would like to touch on your Rothschild article that I was reading last night. And that would be related. And in addition to your article, I saw another reference article under yours comparing Rothschild with Soros. Can I?
Soros is the new. George Soros is the new Rothschild. Not that the Rothschilds have gone away. Not at all. By the way, when we invoke these names, we are not being, yes, we are not being anti-Semitic whatsoever. These people themselves are the real anti-Semites. Most people don't know, or your audience knows, George Soros openly admitted in turning in fellow Jews to Germans and Hungarian Nazis during World War II. He admitted that on a CBS, what is it called on Sunday nights? A 60 Minutes program. So he's the anti-Semite by turning in innocent Jewish people to the Nazis and Hungarian authorities who were just as Nazi-ish as the Germans were. These are the real Nazis. And anti-Semites. If you read the writings of Theodor Herzl or all the Zionist leaders and don't know, there was a documentary on YouTube, they took it out. It was done by some Israeli journalist, wonderful Israeli journalist, quoting passages from Theodor Herzl or the founder of modern Israel, David Ben-Gurion, saying these things and asking people, who do you think said that? People will say it was Hitler or Mussolini or Goebbels or any of these monsters. And at the end, it was things that these Zionists said. These Zionists, you have to understand, originally were self-loathing Jews, secularized Jews who wanted to be trying so hard to be European. And at some point they realized, the Europeans are never going to accept us. We're going to create our own country. And the Rothschilds, facilitated that. So these are not real Jews. Do not tell me when I'm criticizing Rothschilds or George Soros, who happens to be Jewish, that I'm being anti-Semitic by just bringing this up. No. These are the real anti-Semites. And thank God for organizations like Jewish Voices for Human Rights, or the Jewish Voices for Human Rights, or Jewish Voices for Peace. These are two secular Jewish groups that are totally standing up to Netanyahu and the Zionist entity. And thanks to ultra-Orthodox groups like Nutre Karta, people that have sat down with it at Palestine conferences, or another Orthodox Jewish group called Satmar. These people are all anti-Zionists and are speaking up. These are lions. These are our brothers. These are people that are speaking the truth. And I've seen in protest how Palestinian or pro-Palestinian people get so emotional and go to these rabbis in their traditional garbs and hug them. We must love these people. We must support them. We must encourage them. We must sit down with them, have a meal with them. These are people who are on the right side of history and are in fact saving Judaism. And a quotation I want to say before I answer your question is that Zionism is to Judaism as KKK is to Christianity. We must distinguish between Zionism and Judaism. 19 states here in the United States are passing laws in their states that equivocate Zionism with anti-Semitism, which means if you criticize Zionist policies, you'll be anti-Semite, and guess what? Hate speech is the next thing. Freedom of speech, the First Amendment should include the most vile and disgusting speech. That's the whole point of freedom of speech. But now we're having this idea of hate speech, which is so ambiguous and dangerous in wanting to limit freedom of speech. Soros does so much destructive work under the guise of human rights and democracy, destabilizing countries politically, getting people to go in the streets and protest, as has been the case in a certain country in the Middle East. They've had these street riots on and off. Now it's taken care of. And also financially taking countries for hostage and destroying their local economy through day trading and financial manipulation. Soros is a master of that. He has plenty of experience with that. But countries that are sort of off the grid, when it comes to finances, or at least their banking system, that being Syria, Afghanistan used to be the case, but they're not totally part of the Rothschild banking system. Iran, North Korea, Cuba, definitely Venezuela, they will destroy them. Sanctions, economic sanctions, the ultimate goal for economic sanctions is to create social foment, destroy a country societally from within under the guise of human rights. Look at what they've been doing in Iran for so many years. Do some of the issues in these protests are legitimate? Absolutely. Absolutely. But as Lenin used to say, every revolution needs its useful idiots.
Yeah. Wow.
So, I mean, that's what we're talking here. Shadow economy. You have to understand, all wars throughout human history are a form of money laundering. Taxpayers' money being funneled through all sorts of shady businesses, and the unshadiest part is the legitimate military, I call it government military industrial complex. MIC is simply not enough. Military industrial complex was a term that was coined by a five-star general, an honorable man, Dwight Eisenhower, who himself, most people don't know this, was inspired by General Smedley Butler, who used to do the bidding of the Rockefellers until he came to his senses, wrote this book called War is a Racket. We are not in the business of reading, just type audiobook, War is a Racket on YouTube, and you can listen to it. It's a small pamphlet book. Eisenhower and many other honorable generals in our military were inspired directly by General Smedley Butler, which is known as perhaps the most decorated Marine. He is the most decorated Marine Corps general, and he's called the Marines Marine, if you may. And so he was an anti-war general. General Eisenhower was inspired by him, and he used the word military-industrial complex. The correct word is government military-industrial complex, and that is the most legitimate, or at least transparent, if you want to use that word, part of the money laundering of all wars. And so talk about shadow economy, the amount of money laundering that's taking place in Ukraine as a result of this Ukraine-Russia war. And yes, Russia pulled the trigger, but we started the war. Biden started this war, Russia pulled the trigger. They took the bait. They had the way they destroy you is corner you, right? They corner you, and whatever decision you make is gonna end up at your demise. Now, the Russians are extremely shrewd and smart people, so something is gonna come out of this that would not allow Ukraine to be part of NATO. The entire the Ukrainian economy, Ellie, is so unbelievably shady. This $61 billion aid package, which is supposed to go to the war effort against the Russians, a lot of it is going to Ukrainian oligarchs. Chunk of it is going to human trafficking, organ harvesting, biological warfare. I mean, it's unbelievable. That's one of the most corrupt countries on earth. And every time I hear this word that Ukraine is a democracy, I want to cringe. I want to absolutely cringe at the ignorance of equivocating Ukraine with democracy. Now, there is a democratic index. One being the most democratic country, which is usually one of the Scandinavian countries, to 200, which is the least democratic country on earth. Ukraine, last time I checked, they may have changed the number, is 173 in that index. It's one of the most corrupt oligarchical countries. Russia is run by oligarchs. This is a fact. They just happen to ally themselves with Kremlin. But Ukraine is predominantly run by gangs of all sorts and oligarchs of all sorts doing all sorts of shady business in the areas that I just named for you. And we are supposed to say, oh, the democratic country of Ukraine. The reason the Europeans want Ukraine so much is, one, to destabilize Russia. You have to understand, most people don't talk about this. One of my colleagues did a very good, solid academically work on this. I got noticed by Russian intelligence. The idea is to balkanize Russia because of water, not natural gas or all these other natural resources and petroleum. It's about water. The future wars will be over water. You're getting less rain. And Russia and Brazil have number 1 and number 2 reserves of drinkable water. This is huge, huge. Nobody's covering this. They want to balkanize Russia in order to get to that goal and also get the oil, natural gas, all the rare earth minerals and everything else. And number two, it's a corridor. Ukraine is a corridor for Europe. If Ukraine becomes a European ally, that would take away the Iranian corridor that will supposedly be instrumental and useful in the Chinese Road and Belt Initiative. It's got, this war has so many angles to it that the more you dig in, the more you come across that you wish you didn't know, because it's so dirty, this war. It's so immoral from so many points. Not to mention the suppression of the holy Orthodox Ukrainian church. Most people don't talk about that. That church was split from the Russian Orthodox Church, ROC, basically being destroyed little by little. Priests are being beaten up for speaking against sexual immorality and these lobbies that are trying to destroy our children's very basic form of identity, that being gender. Priests are being beat up in Ukraine for speaking up against these social issues, or what I call anti-cultural issues. So, and who's coming over? Who's really taking over Ukraine? This organization called false Jewish organization. I wouldn't call them real. This Zionist organization called Chabad, Chabad. This organization is politically and economically active in all countries of the world vis-a-vis religion and spread of Judaism. They're the least Jewish organization. They're vile and disgusting. And it's these people's ideologies that are behind the narcissism and the savior complex of Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the name he gave to himself. He originally has a Polish last name. Netanyahu in Hebrew means to whom which is given. That's all it means in Hebrew. He interpreted that to whom is given power, or to whom he is chosen. He thinks he's the king. He thinks he's the melech in Hebrew. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because of the head of the Chabad organization many years ago, this devil worshiper named Menachem Schneerson, originally of Ukrainian heritage, his ancestors. He croaked in New York several years ago, 1992, I believe. There's a video of him, it's still on YouTube, and if you can't find it on YouTube, you can find it on Vimeo, in Hebrew, talking to Netanyahu back several decades ago, saying, when is the king gonna arrive? He was literally pointing to the fact that you are the king, that you are the chosen Messiah. I mean, that's how evil and narcissistic and delusional this man is, Netanyahu. Chabad, an organization extremely active in Ukraine. They're the backers of Zelensky, and the world Jewry has emotional ties to Ukraine. Ukraine is supposed to be Israel 2.0. Ukraine has everything. Food, when it comes to food, corn and wheat being the top two, the top 10 exporters of these two food items that I just called for. Lithium, natural gas, oil, all the source of other rare earth minerals that go into our high-tech gadgets. And from what I heard, they have 5 feet of top soil. That soil you can irrigate to grow anything. They get the sun. I mean, it's a perfect location. And Chabad is taking over, and you have this Zelensky, this clown. He's not even qualified to be president. He's the front man for world Zionism. When Israel fails, they're going to want people to move over there. And that plot is failed. It's going to fail. The Holy Ukrainian Russian Orthodox Church and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and the Russian Orthodox Church and Christian Orthodoxy already are aware of that. They're not going to lose this huge territory into a perverted version of Judaism, not real Judaism, a perverted version of Judaism that promotes pure racism. The racist card has been so overplayed that people don't hear it when we say Zionism is pure racism. That card has been overplayed, unfortunately. They look at Palestinians as subhuman. Their defense minister literally said that after October 7th false flag operation. He called them human animals. Now, he was generous to call them human animals. When they sit amongst themselves, they just refer to these people as animals. There's a Hebrew phrase that doesn't come to my mind that a rabbi, so-called rabbi, a false rabbi, used in an interview several years ago. The video is on TikTok and it's spreading everywhere. He used a particular term, a Yiddish term or a Hebrew term that's even worse than animal. in referring to Palestinians. Their mindset is that if you don't kill these animals in Gaza and Palestine, you people have to kill them in your movie theaters in the Midwest. That's the amount of fear mongering and dehumanization of a proud people who had one of the oldest civilizations in human history, that being the Philistines. They're mentioned all over the Old Testament. Philistines is the correct term for Palestine. The reason we use the word Philistine with an F is because there's no letter P in the Arabic language. But the Old Testament being written by Jewish propagandists, not real Jews, the narrative is completely against Philistine, against Palestine. And the epicenter is Ashkelon, in the city of Ashkelon, where it used to be part of Gaza, but it's under Israeli occupation now. What a huge civilization, one of the most ancient civilizations. So they're referred to as less than animals. If that is not racism, I don't know what is. I don't know what is. And so, I mean, we don't even need to go into the realm of Islamophobia. I don't want to defend religion here. I'm just going to focus on basic human, the most indecent type of bigotry, being looking at somebody because of their race, and that race is subhuman, so it can justify their murder.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ellie.
Questions, or we move to the next topic? Somebody down in the comments asked, do you know about World Zionist Party? Is there such thing? I never heard.
The what?
World Zionist Party.
I don't know if there's such things, but there's so many Zionist lobbying groups. American Zionist Organization is one of them, if I'm saying it correctly, the phraseology. This is an organization that RFK Jr. wanted to become a top consultant with. That was his way of pandering to Zionists, right? It was unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. So many things RFK Jr. is right when it comes to Israel. They're all on the same boat. There was in the late 60s, or it could be even early 80s, don't quote me on this, but AIPAC itself was going to be categorized as a foreign terrorist organization because of what they were doing.
Wow.
I mean, it's unbelievable. And AIPAC runs the whole show now. There's this member of Congress that wears the IDF uniform in our U.S. congressional sessions. Forgot his name, but he goes out of his way to wear shorts because he wears artificial legs.
I know. Black guy.
I mean, total. I have to be diplomatic when I'm talking to you. Scum of the worst type. He intentionally wears shorts to show that he lost his, legs in a war, and then he's so super Zionist that he wears the IDF uniform. How that's even allowed to wear a uniform of a foreign nation in our capital is beyond me. That goes to show how much they're controlling the U.S. Congress. And total, it's unbelievable. Unlimited campaign contribution. In the year 2000, when John McCain was running against George W. Bush, he would have been the most viable candidate if you were a Republican to vote for him, because he was talking about campaign contribution legislation, reforming it. Of course, he had to get defeated by the Bush mafia.